Hello, and welcome to this episode of Embracing Cultures.
This year marks the 10th anniversary of the inscription of the Silk Roads, the route network of Chang'an-Tianshan Corridor, on the UNESCO World Heritage List. This ancient network of trade routes connected East and West, facilitating not only the exchange of goods, but also a vibrant flow of culture, ideas, and knowledge.
Today we are in Xi'an, which is a starting point of the ancient Silk Road, and we will explore the cultural exchanges that flourish along these routes and what they mean to us in our world today, especially in the context of the Belt and Road Initiative. We are very honored to be joined by three distinguished guests from Northwest University. They are Marcela Festa, Associate Professor at the School of Cultural Heritage.
Hello, everyone.
Mr. Xu Huidong, Deputy Dean of Institute of Silk Road Studies. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
And Robin Gilbank, Associate Professor at the School of Foreign Languages.
Hello.
We have quite a multicultural panel here.
That's right.
Right.
So, Dean C, I'd like to start maybe by asking you, everybody has heard of the Silk Road. Not that many people really know about the Silk Road. That's different. So when we're talking about the Silk Road, what are we talking about exactly?
In short, Silk Road was a trade and culture exchanging route between Asia, Europe, Africa in ancient and medieval times, with Chinese silk as a representative commodity and medium of exchange.
That's why it's called the Silk Road, right?
Yes, it was consist of four main routes. The first route is desert and oasis route, or you can call it yellow road. Which one is the most important route? It connected China with Europe through Central Asia, West Asia, and North Africa. It originated 4,000 years ago and achieved full connectivity 2,000 years ago. The second one is grassland route. It connected China with Europe through Mongolia, Russia, East Europe. And the third one is maritime Silk Road, or we can call it blue route. It connected China with Europe and Africa through South China Sea and Indian Ocean. The first one is Alpine Canyon route. It connected China with India through Tibet, Nepal, or through Burma. So these four main routes consist the whole Silk Road.
I think this color-coded system, I don't know about you, I've never heard about this before. It really clarifies things, right?
Simplify them.
Silk Road originated 4,000 years ago when Chinese silk was excavated in ruins of Uzbekistan. 2,000 years ago, the envoy of Han Dynasty, Zhang Qian, visited Central Asia, that's Dayue in Uzbekistan now, and Daxia, which is Afghanistan now, and built the diplomatic relations between China and the Central Asian countries and South Asian countries.
When we talk about the Silk Road, we often associate it with some ancient history, like it's a faraway thing. But I'm wondering, what are some of the everyday items that we now use, we eat, we wear, that actually has a cultural legacy from the Silk Road?
Silk is one of probably the best examples because we use silk today, and still today is a luxury item, helped textile industries to develop in China, but also in Europe, in Italy, in France.
Speaking of silk, I watched the documentary the other day, and it says that silk in ancient times was so precious that it could be used as a currency to pay debts among merchants and traders along the Silk Road. Is that true?
Yes. Silk is not only a commodity, but also a medium of exchange between different regions and different ethnic groups.
The legacy of the Silk Road, I would say, we can see in the cuisines. Like we use spices. I'm thinking about cinnamon, I'm thinking about pepper, I'm thinking about fruits such as apricots that somehow diffused all around the Eurasian continent.
Apricots, they originate
In China.
in China. Okay, so it got transmitted along the Silk Road to other countries.
Yeah, in various forms, because there are like all plants, like we were speaking about plants, we have also transmissions of cereals, diffusion of any kind of cereals, the wheat from, let's say, the west to the east, as well the millets from the east to the west. So we have like the Silk Road like helped the diffusion of commodities and food, including textile that we still use today. So I would say that the Silk Road is still like, those are medium of connections, not just in terms of space, but also in terms of time, because we still use them today.
Yes, Robin, what is your take on this? Anything you, in your home country? I heard that China was very popular among the upper class in the British society in a period of time.
You mean ceramics?
Yeah, ceramics.
The secrets of porcelain making were not known until I think the 1700s in England. We have our glazed wares, which were originally used for tea, but then we really coveted the secrets of the China making. So, you know, it's kind of bound up the name of the country and the commodity as well. We think of China and we think of China as well as just tea.
It's a very interesting point. And just you mentioned a lot of culinary traditions we're taking for granted now in China. What are some of it that actually come from the Silk Road?
Yeah, the most famous Shanxi dish is 羊肉泡馍 or 牛肉泡馍, which means beef or lamb stew bread. You know, the cattle and sheep, goat were introduced from West Asia to China about 4,500 years ago. And then the gift of Silk Road became the most favorite Shanxi dish.
I heard that the lamb kebab is also from Turkey, is it?
Kebab is exactly, it came from Persia, that means Iran, to China.
And also
The wheat.
in northern China, especially in this region, very famous for the noodles, of course, usually made from wheat flour. So we associate, I suppose, as Marcello was saying, the spices and things like dates and so on that influences a lot of especially the Hui cuisine in this area, but also the Han cuisine, the majority cuisine, is also inextricably linked with the Silk Road.
Actually, the wheat itself was introduced from West Asia to China about 4,500 years ago.
According to the yellow route, that was the invention of naan bread as we have it now. And the idea was that this kind of bread would not spoil very easily when it was being taken on the camel caravans. So you would have camels just loaded up with these huge pieces of naan bread, like the size of manhole covers, that they'd be taken along. And you're pointing out this is one of the things that is part of the local food here.
Speaking of noodles, yeah, there is also this discussion on the
myth.
Like between like China and Italy. So the origin of pasta, whether pasta was really originated from the noodles that Marco Polo brought to Italy. I cannot say is one way or the other now, but there is this discussion that is quite interesting and very much related to the Silk Road.
I mean, even if that's not true in the most literal sense, don't you think that it says something quite a bit that such a myth would exist in the first place? I mean, what do you think that says?
Well, like I will say that mostly it says that like we are like really one big community. Like our basic needs are the same. So and taste could be shared, knowledge can be shared, and from like Chinese noodles, if that was the case, you can create something else more adapted to the local culture, the local regions. So I would say that is a very, very good example of the spirit of the Silk Road.
So, what exactly do you think is the Silk Road spirit?
Well, in my opinion, like the spirit of the Silk Road in the past as well as the present is cultural appreciation for cultural diversity and knowledge sharing.
Besides cuisine and food, vegetables, fruits, we also have a very famous proverbs in Shanxi dialect. It's very famous Shanxi dialect. We said 可以码成, which means make it snappy. Actually, it's a Persian word, and we borrowed from Silk Road. And it was introduced to Shanxi dialect 1,000 years ago.
Robin, I want your take on how the cultural landscape of Europe was shaped by the Asian Silk Road. What is your take on that? I mean, ancient times.
Well, I suppose, we have accounts of silk in ancient Rome, that was a commodity which, as Professor Xi said, was very much desired, and it had an association with prestige. So a lot of these things which come via the Silk Road, initially they had high cultural or monetary value attached to them. But actually, as time went on, as the volume increased, it became more readily available. So I think it's about participation. People want to have a piece of the action or a piece of the pie, so to speak, or a piece of the silk.
Paper making technique, for example,
Of course,
was transmitted along the Silk Road to the West world. And what else, Mr. Xi?
Yeah, paper making technology is very important for the human civilization. During 2,000 years ago, Chinese invented paper, and the paper making technology were introduced to Central Asia at 8th century, and 400 years later, it was introduced to Europe. At about 12th century AD, Europeans can make paper through the introduction of paper making technology by Arabs. So it changed the historical process of the Europe, because the paper making technology make knowledge dissemination reduced the cost and break the monopoly of knowledge by nobles and clerks. So everybody can learn knowledge through paper. Before that, the parchment is a main document form in Europe, but it's very expensive. You should have ships or coal skins to write as the right material. So paper changed the cultural landscape of Europe. And 200 years later, the Renaissance make Europe step into the modern times. So we can see that the paper making technology is very important, not only for China, but also for Europe. It forged the new form and the historical process of Europe.
It's not just paper making, though, isn't it? It's movable type printing. That was really the conjunction of those two things was what really moved us into the early modern world. You know, especially I'm thinking of the role of printing in the Reformation. You know, spreading ideas and challenging the authorities and the monopolies of the nobility and the church as well. So it was those two inventions in conjunction which I suppose helped to bring on the advent of the modern world as we know it.
Yeah, like somehow they changed the way of communication.
Yeah. So what did China benefit from the Silk Road?
Yeah,
It's a two-way exchanges.
Two-way exchanges. China learned a lot from the Silk Road, just like how to make the bronze and the golden atoms. So the technology were introduced from West Asia about 4,000 years ago. Glassware, glassware was introduced to China about 2,000 years ago.
In the Han Dynasty.
It came from Mediterranean world through the Alexandria the Great, and the Greeks brought out the glass making technology to Central Asia and East Asia. And also we can see that the sculpture technology was introduced from Greek to China through the Silk Road at about 2,000 years ago. As we can see that the terracotta of Qin Dynasty, it affected by the Greek sculpture.
You mean the life-size sculpture? I mean, the image of those statues.
Yeah.
From my understanding, you guys have lived in Xi'an for quite some time. What would you say that you really like about living in Xi'an in particular, and what other kind of echoes of the Silk Road do you see here in particular, in this city?
Well, I think that something that has really resurged after the pandemic is the tourist industry, and in particular the tourist industry which celebrates the golden age of the Tang. So you have the famous New Han style outfits. Every day if you go on the city bus, or well, not so much the city bus, but on the city streets or on the metro, you will almost always see young women dressed in that style as Yang Weifei or whoever. But people want to immerse themselves more in that kind of ancient culture and that ancient ambience.
I think that's one cultural similarity we have. I mean, Chinese people and British people, we all treasure our history a lot.
Yes, yes.
Our history and traditions, they play a very important role in our daily lives.
What attracts me the most is the blend between a rich cultural like settings, as Robin was saying, this combination of old and new. Like, for example, if you go to the Muslim quarter, which is very close to here, you have the opportunity to, like, perhaps to eat very traditional food. But at the same time, you also feel the new, the rush of the modern life. So, and I would say, Xi'an has this very unique features of blending old and new.
Xi'an has a lot of historical documents and ruins, but also its existing starting point of the ancient Silk Road. But it has lots of Silk Road legacies. Just like the Greater Goose Pagoda, it witnessed the multi-civilization exchange of the human world. But it also witnessed the Silk Road spirit, which is peace and cooperation, openness and inclusiveness, mutual learning, and mutual benefit.
Wow,
so I love Xi'an.
That's very well said. So Xi'an itself is the embodiment of cultural exchange and mutual learning. That's very well said, Mr. Xi. Marcella, you are not only a teacher here, you're also an archaeologist. So I believe you come across a lot of interesting artifacts all the time. So can you share with us one or two of them that you feel can reflect the cultural exchange between civilizations or cultures?
Okay, my answer is going to be very simple. I think that, like, probably the artifact that represents, in my opinion, the Silk Road better is the image of the camels, the Bactrian camels, which
Camels?
is
Okay.
I'm saying it's simple because it's not that rare. We find this kind of images everywhere along the Silk Road. But I find it very significant because it reminds us that the Silk Road is not made of objects, but it's made of living beings. The Silk Road would not be possible without humans meeting each other, without animals like carrying things. So it's like a good reminder for us to not just look at the objects, which are very beautiful and very significant in terms of history and artistic values, but also people. So how people lived, why they did meet, how they met, because these are the aspects that actually built the Silk Road.
And camels, they're very resilient.
Oh yeah.
And they work hard. I think it kind of reflect the, those explorers, their characteristics.
You said very right. These figurines of camels and explorers are the best, in my opinion, the best representation of the spirit of the heart of the Silk Road.
But I still have one question about those artifacts. I want your answer because you're a history major also, right? What does those artifacts can tell us that history books cannot?
Well, there are things, especially when we compare artifacts and books. There are things that the artifact can tell us much better, especially when we talk about pre-Silk Road, which is also an aspect of the Silk Road that sometimes I will say is neglected. We know that the Silk Road was not born in one day. The Silk Road was a process, a long process of centuries, even millennia, of people meeting, mostly short distance. So there were chains of these people meeting across various, as Professor C was mentioning before, various routes. So what the artifacts can help us doing is to understand what the process of the Silk Road building is. We don't have much written sources about the pre-Silk Road. So I think that looking at the artifacts will help us to understand, this process that ended up into what now we call Silk Road.
And artifacts are more objective.
Yeah.
And history books are, because they're written by people, they cannot be completely objective. Yes. We're talking about the Silk Road and the cultural exchanges. What role do you think literature play in enhancing transcultural exchanges?
Well, it can play, I think, as big a role as people are willing to let it play. Literature is concerned very much with evoking place, evoking mood, and generating particular feelings in a person's mind. So I think it has a kind of particularly an intangible role that it can play. I think that given its due, literature can be consumed and can be appreciated in a lot of different settings. And I think this is another frontier which is yet to be explored, because there isn't so much literature about the Silk Road translated right now. This is a new potential area for growth. And I think this is something we will see growing in the coming years as the One Belt and One Road initiative continues to unfold. I think that this is something which will snowball in significance.
We are looking forward to your new works regarding that aspect about more Silk Road related literature works.
What is more likely to survive and persist beyond, for centuries, maybe even millennia, are ideas, concepts, things like literature. So perhaps, for instance, the physical pens that might be traded along a trade route from country to country won't last as long as the words that are written. Those we still can have hundreds or thousands of years later. I'm sure that you often, as an Italian archaeologist working in China, get the question about Marco Polo. Marco Polo, and what do you think his spirit then represents today?
Well, okay, Marco Polo has become my best friend since I moved to China.
And this year is the 700th anniversary.
700th anniversary of his death. This year, 2024. So I think that Marco Polo actually represents very well the idea of the importance of writing, but also the importance of people exchange. I want 1 second to like talk about the importance of writing, because Marco Polo clearly brought a milestone, like the travels of Marco Polo. In Italian we call it il milione, which is for many people, and has been for many people, at least in Italy, but I assume in Europe as well, that has represented a first glimpse of China. The Italian kids, even today, like they learn about China from Marco Polo's book. And what I personally do appreciate about the book is not just the content itself, but the perspective. Like Marco Polo went to travel through like the Silk Road and reached China with an open mind, with like this willingness to learn and to like take information and sharing his information.
The reason we're talking about Marco Polo quite often is that he was not only a cultural ambassador, he was also like a pioneer in like practicing people-to-people exchanges. So now I have a question for Professor Xi. I'm very curious, besides merchants and traders, what were the kinds of people that traveled along the Silk Road?
Generally speaking, there were 4 kinds of people who traveled along the Silk Road. The first kind is envoys, who helped their country build diplomatic relations with other countries.
Take messages.
Just like Zhang Qian, who established a diplomatic relation with Central Asia and South Asia. The second kind is merchants, just like Sogdians in medieval times, and Marco Polo, representative merchant. The third kind is, we can call it a scholar, including poet, just like Li Bai, just like the very famous Arabian geographer Ibn Battuta. The fourth kind is, we can call it missionaries, just like the Buddhist monk, Buddhist master Xuanzang. Yeah.
Oh, pilgrims.
Only these 4 kind of people built it, really created the Silk Road through their travels and their records. So I think people-to-people exchange are very important for Silk Road, because Silk Road was created by people, flourished with people, and developed for people.
And the spirit is passed down by people.
Yeah.
I think very much. Look at what we're doing right here. This is people-to-people exchanges at this very moment. We have people from 4 different countries, 3 different continents, all again, sitting here and exchanging and talking about the Silk Road. Now, beyond that though, in a greater sense, I'd like to go one by one and ask, what do you guys think is the legacy of the ancient Silk Road? And then how does that translate into the Belt and Road Initiative, in our times today?
Well, I think you could say that the ancient Silk Road, if you mention the ancient Silk Road to people nowadays, I think they have, it's a mixture of wonder and practicality. It served a practical purpose, as we've been talking about in this interview, but it also, when you hear the names of places like Samarkand and Xinjiang and other places, they're not necessarily areas that people have visited across the world, but they inspire a sense of distance and exoticism, which really opens the mind. I think as regards the One Belt, One Road initiative, you can see the kind of recreation of that, especially in the transcontinental rail route now. That's really, in my experience, going back to England just after the pandemic, many people are talking about that. And surprisingly, people who you would not expect. My mother and her friends were reading about it, and they don't normally take much interest in foreign affairs, but they were talking about this train, although they did have the miscomprehension similar to the ancient Silk Road. we imagine the ancient Silk Road as being camel caravans moving hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, when in fact there were stations and outposts and people just traveled legs. Similar to that with the train, people think that it's one locomotive that goes from one end to the other, which of course would be impossible because you have the different gauges of rail and various other requirements. So of course you have to change the locomotive, but the freight may be on board for thousands of kilometers. So I think there is a sort of symmetry between the two.
The Belt and Road Initiative, in addition to, of course, like enhancing and promoting trade and economic exchange, but at the same time, some of the initiatives, like the very initiative, but like sisters initiatives, also promote what we were talking about before, like people and people exchange, like exchange of visiting students programs, visiting scholars programs, tourism. We know now that like there are several countries, European countries, that can come to China with like a 15 days around free visa. So we this initiative and the Sisters initiative creates the condition for real exchange, person-to-person exchange, and create a condition to learn about other people. So I think that there is this initiative is like very much similar to the Silk Road. Of course, it's adapted to the 21st century, but it's like the basic. I believe they're quite similar, quite comparable.
Silk Road has left lots of legacies, just like World Heritage, including Dunhuang Mogao Grotto, Chang'an Tianshan Corridor, Bergana Karakum Corridor, but also very important spiritual legacy, just like the Silk Road spirit. And I'd like to quote a very famous Chinese scholar, Fei Xiaotong, 16 characters motto to describe this Silk Road spirit. He says, 各美其美，美人之美，美美与共，天下大同, which means we should appreciate our own beauty, appreciate others' beauty, and strive towards to a world of shared beauty and great harmony.
Very well said, yes.
Very well said, bravo.
Yeah. And, President Xi Jinping has said, the Silk Road spirit has become a great heritage of civilization, and he also said, this part of history shows that civilization thrives with openness and nations prosper through exchange.
Right. I think what we can learn from the Silk Road spirit is that we should always keep an open mind, just like our ancestors did, and always respect each other, no matter how different we are, in terms of cultural backgrounds, and always ready to learn from each other. And that is the way human civilizations advance, and that's how our nations prosper. Thank you so much for coming to our show. We have learned a lot.